Steering Committee. And thank you, Recording in Action. Harris Rybach will not be with us today. I think he's enjoying sunny Hawaii somewhere this week. So wish him the best. And we do have a quorum, so we can conduct business. And so I'm going to go into, I'm going to jump to our consent agenda first, and then come back to public comments so that we're kind of on time. Anybody have any, would anybody interested in giving me a motion for the consent agenda? This is the minutes.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
Thank you. That was Amanda. And a second?
This is Julie. I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Opposed, nay. Any abstentions? We'll say that that passed unanimously. All right. I will come back to public comment. Aaliyah, do we have anybody that's registered for speaking?
We do not.
Anybody in this group wish to provide public comment? All right.
I'd actually like to speak up, and this is regarding the information we got out. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
I poured through this, and I think it's very comprehensive. My biggest concern that I see is that we've got almost this split bimodal group of forest workers, contractors, and loggers and stuff. And then we've got this manufacturing side, which the skill sets are very different in terms of what I've seen with respect to the survey. If it was broken out, because I think there's two different industries or two different types of industries there. That was, other than that, I thought was very, very well done. I just think we need to have needs by industry, not needs in general.
Okay, thanks, John. We're going to definitely get into that today.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? All right, moving right along then. We're going to go right into the study and report. And Andrew, which one of you are going to do this?
Yep, I will speak, but wondering if Aaliyah maybe can present the slides, I think as we did last time.
Do you have the slides for me today?
I sent them to you.
Let me pull them up then. Thank you.
Thank you.
He snuck right in there.
You did receive them, Aaliyah.
I did. I apologize. I have to save them as a PDF to get this to work the right way with the presentation.
Great. Thank you. We've been having a few technical troubles on our end this morning, so appreciate it.
It's one of those things that it tries to present on the wrong screen, and I can't share that screen, and so 30 more seconds. There it is. Thank you for your patience.
And thank you for sharing. And we can jump to the second slide. Yeah, so relatively short agenda. I think we'll spend or want to leave most of the time remaining here for discussion, but did want to give a quick reminder of the timeline. As you all know, we are sort of restructuring and refocusing a lot of the report. And have a very quick turnaround time given where we are and what we need to do. So I'll give you a quick reminder of that. Spend a couple of minutes talking about the study updates, what we have been doing, particularly with respect to that restructuring and revising. Then, as you all received some materials from us a couple of days ago, Melissa sent around a summary of the engagement findings, as well as a summary of the survey findings. I'll have a couple of slides on those. You all have the material, so we'll just, provide a couple of prompts, but then want to move on to the discussion of those pieces or other aspects of the report. So next slide, please. Okay, so just a reminder, again, restructuring, revising the report. We're back to working on our task 3, defining the forestry sector. We have refocused to focus on forestry operations and management. We will be aesthetically just retitling some things, but also reorganizing how we're talking about the industry and some of the pieces that we put into that first what turns into the first part of the report. Similarly, we're restructuring, revising the workforce analysis to reflect the new focus. Still working to wrap up the program analysis. I'll spend a couple of minutes talking about that. And then again, consistent with the refocusing, working to complete our revised version of all of the engagement that we've done throughout the project. So that's what we're working on. And the next slide gives you a reminder of the timeline we agreed to at the last meeting, or presented at the last meeting. So again, working as quickly as we can. We propose to deliver the final report draft on Monday, June 9th before noon, leaving about a week for review by the committee, and asking for the committee to send feedback to the HEC no later than the end of Friday the 13th. The sooner the better. If we could get complete feedback earlier, that would certainly help us, but we do allow that full week on this timeline. Then we would expect HEC to compile the feedback, provide it to us by the end of day Monday, in advance of the final main committee meeting to review the report on Tuesday, June 17th. Obviously, we will not have had time to do much more than quickly review the feedback, so we do not anticipate responding to the feedback on June 17th, but intend to present the report draft and then have a discussion about feedback that was provided, any new information, and talk about finalizing the report. Coming out of that meeting, we would deliver the report, ideally by June 24th, but definitely no later than Friday, June 27th. So I'll pause there for just a second to see if there are any questions, but and then move on. Okay, so that's our proposed timeline, and we will deliver on that. I think consistent with some of the feedback, we've revised the report outline a little bit and are proposing a new title to represent the new focus, rather than referring to the entire forestry sector, titling the report Oregon Forest Operations and Management Workforce Study. This is not a huge change. It is refocused. We're certainly open to suggestions, but wanted to put that forward for any feedback, and we can take that now or during the discussion. Beyond that, the structure of the report won't look terribly different. Again, we're revising most of what we've already provided to the committee, as well as wrapping up some other pieces. You can see the sections there. We will be wrapping in findings from the survey, from the focus groups, from the interviews, into the relevant sections in the report here, sections 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, we can move on. So not to repeat myself too much, but again, the decision was made to direct us to refocus the study on forestry operations and management, logging, etc. So we are working on that. Again, recategorizing some of the industries, retitling to eliminate confusion and redundancy, and pulling those changes throughout the rest of the report and the work that we're doing. Some specific changes, we're working on the workforce analysis, and where I would characterize this as extending what we had done. We do have some trucking data that will allow us to provide estimates of forestry-related trucking, which will add, this study is not about size, but it will add a reasonable number of people to our total sort of industry workforce sizes. Similarly, we're going to rely on survey results to allow us to estimate the size of what we term non-employer establishments. Those are self-employed individuals, family-owned entities that do not show up in the other data sources we have access to. So we are working on that. And then in addition, this refocus is leading us to revise the list of occupations for which we can find sort of data in the admittedly problematic SOC code. So we're revising that list to make align definitions across the full report. And of course, working on all the other revisions that we identified in our summary of the feedback we received a couple of committee meetings ago. So again, I'll pause there briefly, see if there are any questions on that, and then move on to a few specifics. Okay. So in terms of programs and pathway analysis, I'd say this is the last big piece that you have not seen much on. We did show a slide on the CTE program availability across the state. We have a little bit more information from our interested parties engagement that will make its way into the report. We're revising our look at apprenticeship data, which comes from the Department of Labor, and our look at the IPEDS post-secondary data, again, consistent with the restructuring, refocusing of the report. And then final piece, as you all know, we not belatedly, but late in the game, received the HEC data we've been looking for, which will allow us to provide for a small piece of the workforce some information about what happens to people who move through forestry-related programs in Oregon's community colleges and universities. What are the employment outcomes? To what extent do they end up in Oregon's forestry industry? So more to come on that one. Next two slides are from that updated, whoops, oh, we're supposed to, oh, there it is.
It's like we have the second chart. We have the second chart, but not the first one.
Okay. Well, we'll roll with it. The first chart I showed last time anyway, it was a picture that showed the number of people completing programs in Oregon's community colleges and universities in forestry-related programs as a share of total number of completions, total number of degrees and other credentials awarded by the system in any program of study. And we made some modifications that were requests to add some additional states, which we did, but the big picture remains that in no small part because Oregon has such an outsized forestry industry, the post-secondary system does emphasize forestry-related programs more so than other states with large softwood lumber industries and other Northwest states that have similar types of forestry activities. But the second perspective we did not have last time, if we compare the number of those completions to the size of the industry, we get a somewhat different picture here. And you see Oregon in the dashed line at the bottom of the chart there. This is looking at the number of completions relative to the number of employees in forestry and logging employment. And that's NAICS 113 for the data wonks. And that's not to say that that's the only part of the industry, but we would expect supporting industries to scale roughly proportionately with that forestry and logging activity. And this gives, I think, a very different picture. While Oregon's post-secondary system does focus more so than most states on forestry-related programs, it's a relatively small state and has a very large forestry sector. And I'd say the specific numbers here are not important, except that not too important, except in a qualitative sense. But what I would take from this is that we can't expect Oregon programs to supply the entire industry. And no one is suggesting that they should, but I think this underscores the need to take sort of a regional look at forestry programs. So that's what we have there, and certainly more to come on all of that. Next slide. So I'll turn it over to Jade, who has talked through some of these concepts before, but just to spend a few minutes talking through the main themes we're seeing that you all saw in the summary of engagement that we will flesh out fully in the report going forward.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, I think that you all received the kind of larger, maybe 2 or 3 page document. Oh, it's long. Actually, I'm lying. It's 7 pages. I'm looking at it now. 7-page document of this slide that has a lot more detail. So I encourage you to take a look at that. But just to walk you through, if you haven't had a chance to really read through that yet, these are the themes that we have arranged all of the many engagement interviews and focus groups and conversations that we've had into these larger themes. And so the first one, workforce in transition, just really talking about what are the changes that have occurred recently and what are we responding to from cultural changes, community changes, workforce demographic changes. A lot of things have really shaped some of the big shifts in all kinds of workforce, recruitment, retention, technology, those things that we really want to flesh out as being something that is, very shifting. This industry is shifting. The talent pathways is a real focus in on the education and training programs, talking about the different approaches, the different pathways that are available, including getting to different parts of the forestry sector, and how young people and folks shifting careers are accessing those jobs, and good ways to reach the youth that are needed to continue this industry and the sector. And then recognizing that the subsectors do have differences. We have a wildfire sector that has a lot of specific needs and resources and opportunities, as well as the logging sector, as well as the sort of state and federal agency jobs. And knowing that each one of those is different and should be, accounted for uniquely. And so how do we think about those differently? Amanda.
Yeah, I just had a question about the subsector specifics.
Yep.
And I don't remember us going through this before, but I guess my first question is why only these 3 were pulled out, and sort of what the difference between sort of the forest contracting, logging, and restoration wildfire mitigation is, because a lot of that is the same workforce and the same companies doing a lot of that work. And there's a lot of people that are also in the private sector, like large industrial landowners and small landowners, that are also hiring many field-based forestry positions, and though that doesn't seem to be included here. So I'm just confused. If we're going to pull out some, we need to make it more clear why we're pulling them out. Because there's sort of contradictory language in the report or in the analysis. That second sentence that sort of is a little bit more comprehensive in identifying the full range of the workforce and different parts of, different subsectors within it, but then it's only these 3 that are pulled out. So just curious kind of what the thought is there, and if there's any opportunity for revising that or shifting how we discuss specific subsectors.
Okay. John, I'm happy to call on you if you want to respond or add on to this, or I can address this and move on. Which is it for you?
I think I kind of spoke out of turn earlier on. I feel like there's about 22,000 jobs that are related to manufacturing in Oregon, and there's about 5,000 that are directly related to logging. And so I felt like the number of respondents that came in, even though they were a lot of small fish in that group, and the smaller number, maybe 15%, were larger groups, but they're larger employers. So I'd like to see that manufacturing side. If we're going to break things out, we need to see that, because they're very special needs compared to, starting a choker setter versus starting a tech in a factory. There's 2 completely different things there, but they're both as equally valid.
Okay, just to quickly respond, because I don't know if you were at the last meeting, but from my understanding, the last meeting, it was decided by this group to eliminate manufacturing and mill work from this scope of this project, which is why we've just talked about the name change. So, and I'll go to Rex next. I think your hand was up next, Rex. Maybe you're responding to that yourself.
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
I will. Rex Storm with Associated Oregon Loggers. Yeah, I'll echo that what you just said, that we're not talking about manufacturing there. And then also I believe it's a misstatement to say that we're only talking about 5,000 logging jobs here. That's not correct. There's more people that work in the forest other than the NAICS code of logging. So we need to have a broader perspective there.
Okay. I haven't forgotten, okay, that the hand went down. So let me respond to Amanda's question really quick. I think, you know, in any time we're gonna take a sector and then try to talk about some of the specifics within the subsectors, there, and we will be clear about this in our report, that there is a lot of overlap in these. That there's no clear, you know, like distinct categories between people who do this and people who do that. I do think, though, that despite that, there is a lot of crossover between employees and approaches and the way contracting works, that we can still say some interesting things about the different subsectors, like logging, like wildfire mitigation and restoration, and the state and federal agency forest jobs. The pathways look different, even though there's a lot of overlap. And I think if there are other subsectors that really need to be included, let's talk about that. These are the three that emerged for us out of our engagement the most. Rex, I see your hand back up. Yeah.
Rex again. You know, building on that, these three constructs of logging, wildfire, and public agencies this is an artificial construct that's really confounding, and it's not helpful to characterize the workforce. And so I guess there need to be like 4 or 5. You know, really, there's one would be harvesting operations, 2 would be transportation and access operations, 3 would be forest management operations, including protection, reforestation, thinning, and fuels. And the 4th one could be land ownership and management prescription. So, you know, a construct like that is more helpful because again, logging is not the only, not a logging employee is not the only one working in the woods, and that's, you know, and this characterization structure looks towards you're either a logger or a firefighter or an agency person, and that is just, it's lumping it too broadly. It's not helpful.
Hey Rex, what was the 5th one?
Land ownership and management prescription.
Thank
You have
you.
a whole cadre of people that own land, make decisions and prescribe and do the professional, how we're gonna manage and make a lot of decisions about management, preparing contracts, things like that.
So you said harvesting, transportation and access, forest management, land ownership, and management. And was that all?
That's
that all?
4.
Yeah. Okay, 4. Thank
But
you.
you see, firefighting is just one of the forest management operations. You know, you have firefighting's protection. There's a whole bunch of other protection things. There's reforestation, there's thinning, there's fuels management, there's thinning and young forest care.
Okay, Rex, I'm going to ask you this question though, because as I was the one who did almost all of, well, yeah, I would say I did nearly every one of these interviews with all of the different folks that we are using this to create these themes. And in my understanding, as much as that there's the categories, I can see where you're coming from with the categories that you have identified. But in all reality, when we're talking to folks about pathways into those careers, education into those careers, issues with retention and recruitment of employees into these jobs, that isn't how people were characterizing the workforce. They were characterizing it more along the lines of these types of, you know, state and federal jobs, lots of jobs within the logging sector, and then, you know, and then this a lot around conservation and planting and other kinds of things. So I think we can redo it, but I think from a perspective of like the pathways piece and the workforce piece, there might be a different way to categorize it that loops some of those similarities across the sectors together. But I'm going to pause there because I know Amanda has something to jump in on too.
Well, I was going to add
Yeah.
that, you know,
Yeah.
you're talking about your focus groups. Well, how
Right.
is the survey information woven into the focus group data? You're
Well,
using
yeah,
those as two
and that's
independent
coming.
data sets, and I would
Right.
suggest that we should meld those together.
Yeah, and they definitely will be, but right now I'm only presenting right now on the engagement analysis, and I think the next few slides will be the beginnings of our analysis of the survey data. But
Well,
yes,
you know, all I'm trying to do is counsel you on, we're looking for a report that'll have helpful utility and what you're characterizing and suggesting are the pathways
yep,
and the talent pathways as you describe them. And what I'm providing you feedback is you can do better because this is not helpful.
Amanda.
Yeah, one potentially helpful reframing that I think might be a good way to think about this, kind of collaborating, coordinating with Jade, what you're talking about and what Rex is talking about is maybe focusing it instead of maybe some of it could just be rhetoric and some of it could just be like the words being used. And maybe a better way to think about it is instead of subsectors, it's like specifying jobs because, I think about being a forester, right? And like I might go get a 4-year forestry degree and I could go work for the private sector, I could go work for the public sector. Um, and so the way that logging and maybe, firefighting are designated here are related more to jobs, or like job potentiality, and that's where maybe breaking that out with like transportation, road construction, that's a very specific job.
Yeah.
And not grouping it with logging per se. And then the kind of state, federal, private landowner, forest management piece that Rex was talking about, maybe that's just simply forest and being a forester. And because that has a very specific pathway. As we think about how many foresters we need in the state, there's a share of that are needed by the public sector. There's a share of that are needed by the private sector, but the pathway is very similar as far as, thinking about education. So that might be a different reframing in how to think about it and maybe not calling it subsectors, but maybe focal careers or something more like that. I don't know if that resonates with you at all.
Yeah. I think that makes sense.
But if anybody else on the committee has an idea there, that I'm just kind of spitballing.
Okay, so we will revisit that. The investing in people in place is a focus on what are some of the larger benefits of the forestry sector, and the industry's role in, stewardship, community engagement, all the kind of things that are hard to categorize that are like larger benefits that might not be as immediately obvious in some of these other categories. And so really painting a picture that there's these extended benefits that the sector brings to Oregon that are sometimes unseen. And then, Julie.
Thanks, Jade. One of the things I just want to make sure we point out during this, and I believe you categorize it, but just as a heads up, a lot of times you talk about youth programs, and especially in forestry, we have a lot of youth programs, but they're not maybe necessarily as workforce related. And so I think just keeping in mind, you're talking about youth workforce programs because we have a lot of groups OFRI works with and OFIC and many others support like Forest Today and Forever, Forest Forever, OFRI programs, talk about trees that are youth education programs that aren't part of this study. And so I think just to make sure we're categorizing these are youth workforce programs, because I think it could tune some people off from the sector that their work's not being recognized, just to make sure we're understanding youth programs. We have a lot of youth programs around the state, but that wasn't the focus of this.
So if I'm understanding correctly, I think some of those youth programs could fit into this investing in people in place, right? They're not about getting those youth into careers, but they are benefiting the youth in sort of more broad ways around, responsibility and connection and those types of things. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
And there are also, some of them lead to workforce development, but a lot of times in that K-12 arena is just about engaging them with Oregon's forest and
Right.
inadvertently through the system. And so, we have a lot of the sector that volunteers in those programs, that are part of those programs. When you set this up, I think a lot of us interpreted you were looking more at the youth programs like Lomocaso, that's that hands-on, youth core
Yeah.
type. And so I just would encourage that maybe we help define our, make sure education is a pretty wide,
Mhm.
topic, just to make sure that we're focused in on what exactly those programs that you looked at.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I see them sort of fitting in, like the ones that are like Katsu would go fit into the talent pathways where they have extended benefits, but there's still a pathway. And then the ones that are, kind of more broadly like getting folks connected to their forests fit into our larger conversation of investing in people in place. But both of them offer both. So, I mean, I don't know where exactly they'll fit, but I see what you're saying. Okay, Amanda.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight a few more examples of kind of what
Okay.
Julie's talking about, because I tell you what, I keep telling folks, and I talk to Julie about this a lot, I'm just a dirt forester. That's what my degree's in. And I somehow have found myself in this like education space. And I
Mhm.
learn stuff every day about what's happening. And just this morning, I had a meeting with Oregon State University, one of Mindy's colleagues, Francesca, and I just found out about a new program that they have with these smile clubs at high schools, and they're doing after school programming, developing new models of teaching about forestry. Like I had no idea this was even happening. They got an NSF grant in 2019, and they're looking for more funding. So there's like so many of these. There's outdoor school, which we've not even really talked about, and all of these things definitely increase the exposure to students and youth about what's done in the forest. And some of it does relate to careers, and maybe that's how people decide they want to do this in the future. But I don't know that we have the time or energy at this point to be able to do a comprehensive review and include all of those. So I think we should absolutely, indicate that they exist, and that there are a lot of those. And honestly, I would love to have a better understanding of all of those. That's like a whole nother study, right? Of like youth education. That's happening in the state. But so I think my point is just like making a nod that exists.
Yeah.
Those aren't focused specifically on career pathway development. They're very focused on exposure, and that there's a lot of those opportunities in the state, and sort of leave it there high level. You could identify a few examples, but really being very clear in the report and the study that we're not trying to be comprehensive or complete in that specific part of sort of informing youth, educating youth about forestry. We're really focused here on the workforce pathways side.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds great. All right. The last one, before, kind of the insights to inform future action is about the public perception and storytelling. Like, what are the opportunities to take what is still clearly a kind of a big feelings thing in Oregon? We heard a lot of kind of residual understandings of what forest management can and should be, that came from different pockets of the sector, that we think is like an opportunity to sort of reframe the narrative around the forestry sector, highlighting, the community impact that we just talked about, the environmental stewardship that's kind of built into the forest management piece, the innovation and industry leaders, like how this field can offer values-driven opportunities for a kind of a growth in this workforce that right now might not fully understand all of those components. So that's the sort of like dominant narrative piece of this that we think came up a lot and needs to be talked about in this report. And then the final one is sort of just, how do we think about what came out of all of these conversations, and where do they ask us to focus our thinking and our energy on to strengthen the state's forestry workforce in general. So that's that. And, as Rex mentioned, this is going to be, in combination, of course, with the quantitative pieces that Andrew has shared, and then now handing it off, I think, to Melissa to talk about what's emerging from the survey analysis that we're doing now.
And I'll actually talk through the survey, but we can go to the next slide. Thank you, Jade.
Yep.
So we gave you we didn't collect any more responses. The survey was done, I think, as of the last committee meeting. So you've seen you've seen this before, but just wanted to say a couple of things about the survey. As you know, was sort of a not last minute, but late addition to this study. And what we were hoping to do with it and will do with it was get more qualitative information from a broader base of different types of entities than we could through the interviews and focus groups, as well as use some of the results to inform the quantitative analysis, which I mentioned, particularly with respect to the non-employers. So just wanted to make that point again. Had 106 responses in total. We did exclude a few respondents that reported only working in forest products manufacturing because of the refocusing of the study. We do mention forest products manufacturing because a number of respondents work in logging, in forest products manufacturing, and other industries, and so we want to reflect that diversity sort of from the forest operations side. On the right side of the slide here, just basic percentages. Most of the respondents were employers. They formerly employed workers in their entities, over almost 4/5. About 1/6 reported being self-employed or relied only on family members, unpaid family members, contractors, etc. And then a few reported not knowing the answer to that question. We've replaced those few respondents, classified them as employers, but they're a relatively small share of the total. So just want to present that as context. In the next few slides, just repeat some of the information that we presented in the summary that we provided. I'm happy to talk as we're moving through this about anything that you saw in the survey data that resonated, didn't resonate, thoughts you have on what might be important. Our goal, as Jade mentioned, will be to integrate survey findings, engagement findings, and the quantitative analysis across the major components of the report. So we can go to the next slide. So a couple of workforce challenges. Most respondents agreed or strongly agreed that attracting workers was a significant challenge. These are just employers. Things that we've talked about already here. They saw higher pay in other industries, not enough skilled candidates, less demanding work environments in other industries as key challenges. And I will say that the answer is not just to raise pay or make the work less demanding. It doesn't work that way, but thinking about other, through the engagement, suggestions, recommendations that came through on the survey, how can employers better communicate the benefits of work? But a large share of employers did report having workforce challenges. Retention was also reported as a significant challenge by a lesser share, almost half, but causes were similar. Again, the work in other industries, competing industries was seen as less demanding, higher pay, worker attendance was reported frequently as a problem. Even though that's less than half, that's still a major share of the workforce if we can extrapolate. And so we have, not surprisingly, significant recruitment and retention challenges reported. And there's more detail in the survey responses and that will show up in the report. Next slide. So we also asked, we're not reporting on all of the questions, the summary we provided does that, but we also asked about where employers were most likely to find good candidates. We asked the non-employers what kind of trainings they found is the most useful for themselves or others they worked with. For the latter category, most frequently noted were on-the-job training and industry experience, continuing education seminars and online courses. And also four-year degrees were mentioned by multiple respondents. Relatively small group of respondents. We don't want to make a big deal out of the specific counts, but these definitely floated to the top in terms of what the non-employers reported as useful sources of training. For employers, reliable sources of skilled workers included on-the-job training, again, or industry experience, word of mouth, that's your informal networks, friends and family, and also advertising and social media. Advertising on social media were noted by multiple respondents. We asked the self-employed respondents about their desired workload and whether they were able to achieve their desired workload over the prior 12 months. they reported most of the time, or about half of the time, they said yes, others didn't. We asked about specific challenges to maintaining the desired level of work. The obvious not enough work available was noted multiple times, but also a number of respondents reported policies and regulations were getting in the way of the work doing the work that they wanted to do. Workforce issues, subcontract availability were reported by multiple respondents, as well as timber supply on the non-employer side. Top challenges were similar for the employers, though. Policies and regulations were cited by a number of respondents, as was timber supply. Okay, next slide. And just sort of wrap this piece up, we asked several open-ended questions, reporting some results here from our request of respondents if they had any recommendations for the state to better support forestry and the sector's workforce. And the most common responses after we categorized them, most common by far was to expand training and the training infrastructure in the state. Almost a fifth of respondents of all the respondents identified that. About a tenth identified regulatory reform as something the state could do to better support the workforce and forestry operations. Also noted by a relatively large share of respondents with increased harvesting, increased industry awareness, and reducing taxes. And Amanda, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just have two questions. So this is what's on the slide is different, or it looks different than what was in the summary analysis. Is this a summation of all three of those bulleted categories, or is this just new information that came in compared to when the analysis was complete?
Yes, it's updated information.
Okay, well, that's interesting for one. And then, secondly, this has to do, Jade, kind of with your work as well, with the engagement stuff. I find it to be very interesting and on the implementation side, very informative to know and have you guys maybe pull out some specific quotes from the survey and from the focus group and the interviews, because even if one person mentions it really isn't an outlier. And sometimes that can get lost when we're trying to sort of smooth the data for a statistical analysis. And I have to imagine that there was some really, really informative things said during those interviews, during those focus groups, and in kind of these fill in the blank sections of the survey. And I think that having specific quotes pulled out would really add to what we do next and the benefits that are going to come from this report. So obviously there's a lot of data. You guys have looked at all of it. And so you might have a really good idea of like what kind of comes to the top as far as like really informative, something that we should really look at and think about doing. People are very creative and have been thinking very deeply about these topics. And so I'd be really curious if you feel like there are opportunities to do that and just whether or not you guys are expecting to do that to begin with.
Yeah, I'd say absolutely. Well, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say the same thing, like 100% agree that quotes are such rich pieces of the data, and to hear it in people's own voice is really powerful. And so, yeah, we'll definitely be highlighting a few of those key quotes.
Yep. And I will say, so yes, Amanda, you're exactly right. Behind all of these categorized the responses are specific words, and some we won't highlight all of them, but some of them there are sort of sub themes, and we will certainly identify particulars from some of the responses in the main report.
Yeah, and just to put a finer point on it, I think all of us can probably agree with everything that's on the screen, right? But it's like, okay, so what? Like, what does that actually mean? What did people actually have to say? And that's like we talked about, that's where I think there's real opportunity to operationalize some change.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, next slide. And so this is the sort of the last piece, and then we'll open it up to discussion on any or all of the above, or anything else study related. But our next steps, not surprisingly, are to wrap up our sort of fleshing out of all the material we've presented, turn it into a draft report, which we will deliver on June 9th. And so with that, we'll open it up. Any other input, comments, questions?
Go ahead, Julie.
Julie?
Thanks. If we wanted to send specific feedback on the 2 studies you sent, is that something that we can do? Are you looking at like this week that we could send things back, or what's the timeline that you'd accept those?
Yes, this week would be good. Yes, definitely open to any written feedback. I think you could root it through the heck, but definitely the sooner we get it, the better we can act on it. And Amanda?
First off, I just want to say thank you guys for listening to us and doing this survey. And I feel like in reading these 2 analysis documents, it really feels like our suggestions are really coming through, and it's feeling more comprehensive and more accurate in the way that the industry is being described. So I just want to say thank you for putting all the time and energy into doing that and hearing us out and listening to us, because it is really apparent that there's a little bit of a different kind of flavor to some of the narratives that are portrayed in these work products. So just first off, wanted to say that, because I know it's taken a lot to get here. I know you guys work pretty late, because I get emails from Melissa pretty late. So really appreciate that. And then secondly, just kind of for next steps, Andrew, you just kind of presented what those next steps are, but I'm curious, I'm guessing that sort of these analysis papers will be in the appendix, but will these have specific chapters associated with them? Is the information going to be integrated into some of the chapters that we've already seen? I'm just curious about that integration piece.
Yeah, our intent is to integrate, the survey addressed sort of workforce challenges, and we can put that in our workforce analysis section. There's some pathways information that sort of belongs in our pathways analysis section. I think everything will fit nicely. There may be bodies of material that we need to address a little bit differently, but our intent is to sort of weave all of this into the main pieces: the industry description, the description of the workforce and the challenges, the description of the education path and training pathways, and the recommendations as well. I mean, we have recommendations from the survey respondents that will inform what we say there as well.
Well, I thought that we'd have a lot stronger conversation today. Everybody comfortable that we keep moving forward on the timeline? Looks like that's a positive. Yes. All right. Well, okay. Amanda, go ahead.
I'll ask one more question. We're all together, so we only get to do this so much, and our next one is not going to be for a while. So I know we talked about, and in the minutes, we had kind of a 5-day turnaround that you guys were expecting as new chapters come through. I'm guessing that these new chapters we're talking about and the integration of this material, you guys will be sending those along via email as they're completed, and then, kind of with that request for a respectful use of time to get that material back to you guys as quickly as we can for that final integration into a draft for that next meeting on the 16th or 17th, whenever our next meeting is. I can't remember off the top of my head, but just want to verify that that is the case with you guys. And I guess one of the things that I've been curious, I don't know that we've actually received this, is a full outline of the report. So we know how many more chapters are coming, what those chapters are called, so that we kind of know what, as we think about our day jobs and all the other things that we have to do, how we can fit those pieces into our kind of review timeline as we try to make space and time for this. Is that something that you guys can share or explain to us?
Well, so I'd say in terms of chapters, that last slide was essentially it for at a high level. I mean, the industry description, workforce, sort of deep dive on workforce, the programs and pathways, that's sort of the educational and training component, and then recommendations. And we've talked separately about engagement and survey, but again, we'll wrap those in. And in terms of timeline, I think as we have drafts that we feel are complete, we will send them along. But our intent at this point is that you will have everything by June 9th, and we may not have pieces done before then.
All right, everyone, last call. Rex.
Mine is a quick question or a quick suggestion. In the survey document you sent us, we would much appreciate it if you get our organization name correct. It is Associated Oregon Loggers, or we're not the Association of Oregon Loggers.
Apologies.
So just a minor detail, but you always want to build relationships. Call the person the right name.
Yes, that's an important detail. Absolutely. Apologies.
All right.
Okay.
Well, I think that concludes our business for today. We'll give you part of your day back and get these folks on their way to completing their tasks. Last call. All right. Thanks, team. Thanks, committee. Appreciate it, everybody. I hope I got everything. I think I did. All right.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.